So we've been looking at Sangha Night at these 5 great stages of the spiritual life, of the spiritual path. And we've been doing that by exploring stories. And we've started with this stage, the first stage of integration. And we've been using stories to draw out teachings, perspectives on integration. And like the great stage of gathering together one's psyche. And there's been many ways that that's been done over the week. We've heard about integrating parts of ourselves, and we've looked at integrating different aspects of our life, and also integrating our past. So there's been a really rich offering of different ways into this first stage of integration. And next week, we're going to move on to the next great stage, which is positive emotion. So we've gathered ourselves together, gathered our psyches together. What next? How are we going to transform that into something positive, something energetic? But this week, we're going to hear from 3 speakers, 3 short talks. So we're going to hear from Denis, Vicki and Maitrivasin about their personal experience of integration in their life. To give us more of a background of what integration looks like in practice in these 3 people's lives. So we'll do the usual Zoom short talk routine, which is just going straight from one speaker to the other, and then we'll give them all a round of applause at the end. So I'm really looking forward to these short talks. They're often a real highlight. So I'll pass over now to Denis.
Thanks, Haridasa. I wanted to talk tonight about some of my experiences over the last few years about relationships with work colleagues that led to me becoming an unintegrated person, and development of 2 sort of separate aspects of myself that I needed to gather together. So first of all, I work for Sheffield City Council in the housing department, in a particular department that deals with people's furniture requirements. And I've been doing that for quite a few years, and on the whole, I really enjoy that work. However, other people come along to spoil things for me. So anybody that knows me quite well, spiritual friends, GFR groups, Mitra groups, would probably verify that over the last couple of years, very often in my check-ins, I've talked about difficulties with people at work. What I'd like to say is that my check-ins would sort of say, well, yes, I'm fine, I'm happy, I've got a positive attitude, and I like to live out my highest ideals at work by exemplification. It's everybody else, they're the problem. So what do I mean by that exactly? And I'll just give you a little list of things that I would check in about. So we have things such as negative attitudes, complaining, coarse and vulgar language, opinionatedness, arguments not thought through, blinkered kind of vision of things. This was becoming the world I was inhabiting. These observations was starting to become the world I was inhabiting at work. And I started to feel like within the spiritual life, I was a serial complainer about other complainers. So I became aware that this was becoming a separate version of myself at work to how I am at the Buddhist Center. So at the Buddhist Center, I'd like to think that I'm sort of an open person, full of positivity. I like to be seen and to be known. And yet at work, I was becoming distant from colleagues, interacting with them less, not joining in conversations or keeping them to business only. And in short, I was becoming a bit aloof and uncommunicative, and actually not very interested in the people around me. That's the top and bottom of things. So what was the reason for this? I mean, what we looked at last week in the talk about the Lambton worm was this idea of something that we bury and forget about and try and pretend it's not actually there anymore. And the Lambton worm for me is pride. What was developing and sort of feeding into all these aspects of myself at work was a pride, and a pride sort of telling me that I was superior to my colleagues, and that I didn't particularly need them for anything. They were of no real value to me. So this pride was coming in two parts. The first part being I am superior to my work colleagues, but I'm inferior to a great many people at the Buddhist Center that I admire and I aspire to be more like. So we've got these two versions of me, really. At the center, somebody inspired, open, aspirational and full of positive emotion. And at work, I was quite lifeless, lethargic and disinterested, really. So the work I did around becoming more integrated revolves around three areas of practice, really: meditation, reflection, and spiritual friends. And with the spiritual friendship aspect, there was a particular conversation I had with a friend, and a particular word that sort of stood out and sort of really informed me of the way forward. And that word was acceptance. So that made me start to think more in terms of accepting the people that I work with as products of their conditioning, just as I am. They inhabit their own little world, just as I do. And they can change, just as I've changed, and I can continue to change. I just needed to be more accepting of them. And so reflecting on that really started things moving positively for me. In meditation, I could easily fill the stage 4 with different people regularly, just like moving them around like so many chess pieces. It was very easy to find a difficult person. But I started to focus on myself in the first stage of the Metabhavana, and a sort of realization that actually I'm part of this problem. I need to deal with this pride, if you like, and deal with that with forgiveness. So not sort of be too hard on myself about that. And the fifth stage of the Metabolic as well was equally important. I began to realize that I wasn't actually practicing this fully. The fifth stage isn't selective or exclusive to certain groups of people that I feel an affinity for. It's for everybody. It's for absolutely everybody. And I was excluding people. So the results of this, I mean, I think most people would sort of agree I've stopped complaining generally, or it's far less than it was about people that I work with. I have a different sort of relationship with them, a much more harmonious relationship. And I don't need to follow them and be part of the group, but nevertheless, I don't need to be the other end of the spectrum and sort of distance and exclude myself. So I'd just like to sort of summarize by drawing parallels with the story of King Arthur the other week, which I really enjoyed listening to, and the story of Gawain. Gawain was on a quest and he took up a challenge, just as I've done. I think the sort of immortal phrase comes out of that, of marrying the hag. I really sort of enjoyed listening to that. And that's exactly what I've had to do, is look at the dark aspects of myself and bring them on board with me and transform them with kindness. So that's my work in progress with my work colleagues. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Denis, for that personal story. And yeah, I'm just going to go through my personal story about integration. And I'm going to specifically talk about integration in terms of gathering all of the separate parts of myself. You know, inside I've got loads of different selves, each with their own agenda and hopes and fears. And my aim as a Buddhist is to align all of these parts of myself into just one direction, into the direction of enlightenment. And if I can do this, then all of my energy would be used to go towards this goal, this one thing, rather than being stretched and pulled in different directions. So for me, as for many people, integration happens gradually and it happens over time. And I will continue to become more integrated as I work on it until some lifetime in which I reach enlightenment. But I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to tell you some personal stories of one particular summer that I found very integrating indeed, these experiences. And yeah, and they're all true stories. So this was the summer of 2019 when we could still go places. And the first kind of integrating event that happened was I went on a retreat at Taratnaloka, which is the place that you go to for training for ordination. And I went on a 2-week-long retreat, which was very intense, an intense time of study, reflection, and meditation. And it was there I was able to open up to parts of me that I'd been pushing down or been pushing away. So there was a significant practice that helped with this. And it just happened quite naturally. I was meditating and I was visualizing my younger selves meditating with me or just being there with me. And maybe there was myself as a 3-year-old, as a 10-year-old, as an 18-year-old, you know, all those years ago. And I just had them sitting with me in meditation, and just forgot to start my timer. I had them sitting with me and I was able to feel metta for them. And I could just imagine myself, I could look at myself in my past and I could really take myself in and think there's nothing that I have done or could do that would make me any less worthy of metta. You know, everything that has happened to me, everything I've done is a product of conditions, and it's okay. And there's nothing to be afraid of. So I think that stillness and time is really, really important for anyone wanting to become more integrated. When we're caught up with our busy lives, it can be so easy for us to keep pushing down these subconscious separate parts of ourselves that we're not normally aware of. So when we put ourselves in conditions that are quiet and still and empty of distractions, it means that we can allow for the things in our depths to surface. And it's really important to allow this to happen in an environment that is safe, like being on retreat, and that we try and come into contact with ourselves with feelings of acceptance and of metta. And sometimes that's quite hard to do. So it's always good to get some transcendental help and bring to mind the Buddha. And I particularly bring to mind Green Tara, because I know that those are beings that represent a kind of infinite metta and will always have this unlimited metta for me and every part of me. So another practice on this retreat that was quite significant for integration is, well, it was the going for refuge and prostration practice, which is a bit strange when you explain it. So it's a practice where you visualize the refuge tree, a traditional Buddhist image, and our one has Sangha in it and all of his teachers across time and space. And you go for refuge to them. And what was really important for me in this practice was the figure of Vajrasattva. And you may have come across Vajrasattva at events like the New Year's Eve puja. And he's a very important figure around death, around people's deaths. So he's the last form before formlessness. And he is a clear, pure white color, free of any stains. And he holds a Vajra to his heart and a Vajra bell in his lap. And he's well loved within Tibetan Buddhism as the great purifier. And it's this purification aspect that I found really strong. And I found it really strong because there's a part in the practice where you imagine you've been completely purified by all of these figures on the refuge tree. It can get a bit, yeah, I suppose a bit magical, like this imagination that you're bringing to the practice. And what I realized when doing this was that in my heart, I realized I was never unpure to begin with. You know, in Western culture, it's so prevalent to have this ingrained Christian hangover of original sin and, you know, a deep down everlasting fall from grace. But that's not the truth of it. You know, in Buddhism, we see that actually we have an integral kind of pure self, the potential for enlightenment, which can never be covered up. And so I realized during this practice that there was an integral internal part of me that was completely pure, and that was the important bit. So all of my other selves, you know, were welcome. You know, I was completely welcome. So that was really integrating when I could accept all these parts of me and know that integrally I kind of had this, internal purity. And I've got another story, which is during this summer, the summer of 2019, which was very integrating. I spent some time working at festivals. So I really love volunteering at the Buddhist Festival, which is a really amazing and just completely crazy place. They offer an immense amount of workshops and activities, which I really enjoyed. And what I found particularly integrating being at Buddhist was because it was putting together these two parts of my life. So there was my Buddhist life, and there was also this kind of past life of a festival party goer, and they were being melded together in an experience of this festival. So since I was about 15, drugs and alcohol were a really big and integral part of my life. So this included going the festival scene, drum and bass festivals, as well as the bigger ones. And I had no real plans for my life other than to do drugs and drink alcohol with my friends, you know, for the rest of my life, however long that ended up being. And luckily, the Dharma found its way into my life and pretty quickly changed all of that. And Buddhist is a festival that prides itself on being drug and alcohol free. So for me going there, it was really, really integrating because I was in a familiar environment, but I had changed as a person, and that included my practice of Buddhism. So I had these two strong parts of myself where I could accept myself and how I had been in the past and rejoice in the place that I was in now. And I'm sure that the lying down yoga and the shamanic trance dance and the chakra aligning, blindfolded dancing were probably helpful as well. So the last significant event I'm just going to quickly touch on was going to Glastonbury Festival. So I went to Glastonbury Festival with a team from Buddhist and I taught meditation there. And that was really the difficult one, because at Glastonbury, drugs and alcohol are just everywhere you look. And I could kind of see myself as like a young teenager in everyone there. And it was really integrating because here I was in an environment like that. And yet I was teaching meditation. So it was the most important thing in my life, I felt, you know, my Buddhist practice coming together with this festival scene. And yeah, and I could really realize that part of me was there because, you know, the party goer, festival goer was a really big part of my life, and it's still like a big part of me, and I can see it and I can accept it for what it is. And it's not a subconscious desire that's pushed down, because I can let it arise and look at it and appreciate it. But through my practice of the Dharma, I can see something more beautiful. You know, my Dharma practice is something more beautiful that I'm moving towards. So I don't need to do loads of drugs and drink lots of alcohol, because I've got the Dharma life instead. It's not always easy, And I've gone over a bit over time, but I'm just going to quickly mention that what was really important about this going to festivals was that I did it with friends, and I did it with Moksha Tara, who is a particularly wonderful friend of mine. And it was really important for me because Moksha Tara made it really clear that she would accept me in any form and no matter what I had done. So it made me be able to accept myself and my different parts, because Moksha Tara was there, a loving friend, and open and accepting of me. So I just wanted to bring to light how important the Sangha is when we're trying to integrate ourselves and accept all of the different parts of ourselves.
Hey, hello. Yeah, thank you, Denis and Vicki. And yes, like I can feel myself wanting to take more time just digesting that almost. But we do have limited time, so I want to gently move on to sort of my experience or how I'm working with integration. And there are many similarities, I suppose. There's many similarities between the other talks as well. And the example I'm going to use is quite a big thing in my life, or it's been kind of quite a big thing throughout my life. And it's kind of, it kind of includes what Vicki was talking about, Vajrasattva. So this purification in a way, in terms of getting rid of things that, well, particularly in terms of drain my energy. So stories and things that take my energy away, disintegrate my energy, and basically quite limits me, quite limitly. And this story basically goes back to, I can trace it back to being very little. So it's kind of like bringing my past and working with it in the present to be more and more in line with the future I aspire towards, with growing and being of more and more help to myself and others towards realizing my fullest potential, towards moving towards Buddhahood. And in that journey, in my attempts to sort of try and grow and develop, I do quite often realize that there's something in the way, and it's quite often being kind of almost invisible. And I step forward, I think, I just got to go over there. I get there, and somehow it's taking a lot more energy than I expected, and I feel really tired and I feel really drained. And it's like there's something that's been draining my energy away. It's been disintegrating my energies, my motivations. And it's recently I was reflecting on this, and I got an image, and quite often that works for me. I kind of get images of things, and it was kind of like I was changed, and I was attached to a dead body, and every time I was trying to go somewhere, I was having to drag this along with me. So things were taking a lot more energy. It was just much harder to do anything. And everything I did, took a lot more energy than I thought. And in a way, this dead body was an image basically for a story. And the story is generally around like not being good enough, being in a way uniquely flawed, or being an imposter or a fraud or something around that in its many forms. So this story works in many forms, but it's generally around that idea of just not being good enough. And everything I do is kind of undermines it, and it drains my energy when I'm trying to do it. And I was trying to get to the root of that in a way, and trying to get more of a sense of when the story started, how it started. And particularly Daniel was very helpful in a way. He mentioned that he put me onto this when I was talking my life story with him. So I've got a lot of gratitude and like to rejoice in one of his many qualities and many benefits that I've had from him. And it's an incident I remember from being at primary school when I was learning to read. So at the time, as things were, I wasn't very good at reading, and possibly because maybe I'm slightly dyslexic or something, but I wasn't very good at reading. And what they do in those days, when I was with basically 4 or 5 of us in the class weren't very good. We'd have to go up and stand in front of the class and hold our hands out and get hit by a big ruler. So that was the way that, I suppose that's how they thought children were motivated, and it wasn't working anyway in my case, certainly not. But it's like, I remember in those days standing there and thinking, actually, that rule is not hurting. This is really, really painful, and it's really horrible, but it's not the ruler. It's not the ruler. It's like the embarrassment and there's something really, really painful and hurtful being there. And I remember just this story being quite helpful, actually, going, well, I'm a bit of an idiot. I better get used to this. So I kind of fed this story, and I went for refuge to it to almost numb the pain of well, the embarrassment in a way, and being up there in those sort of conditions. So I could trace the story back to being very, very, very young. And 35 years or so on, the story is still there. The story is still there. And it kind of, it drains a lot of my energy. It kind of, it gets, well, it's quite painful, and it's led to depression in the past. And it certainly limits my growth and my ability to help others as well. And it also keeps me from trying new things that I don't think I'll be good at, because there's like a fear of trying to do something that I might not be very good at. And there might be some kind of punishment around that, which is really limiting. And I work with this story basically by applying the Dharma. So I try to get rid of the story, or trying to work with it by applying the Dharma. And in a way, one of the things that we've all learned is the gap. So when I catch myself with this story, when I catch myself draining my energy, taking my motivation away, and disintegrating me from my aspirations and taking me away from it, I kind of try and get in that gap, try and use the teaching of the gap and try and find a more creative response. And another thing is it needs buckets and buckets of metta. So buckets and buckets of metta, really. Like when we're doing things like this, we really have to bring a lot of metta to it. The teaching around the second arrow is really helpful if I can just label that story as this is the second arrow, this is the second arrow. It really takes a lot of the power away from it. And also a verse from the Dhammapada around those who do not entertain such thoughts as he abused me, beat me, conquered me, robbed me, will still their hatred in a way, will still their hatred of others himself. It's very helpful to reflect on, and that's what I want to do. And also, I think the most direct way I work with this story, or I challenge this story, and I try and undermine it, and refine it and take it out of my experience, stop it from taking my energy away, disintegrating my energy, is to work with the law of karma and karma vipaka, and to reflect on that. And for me, that involves taking responsibility in a way, because when I take responsibility for my part in these things, which in a way is kind of recognizing that I created the story and I've fed it for over 30 years now. I've been feeding this story, keeping it alive. And do this with a lot of metta, because I was very young and I didn't know any better. So it's not another way to beat myself, but it's actually taking responsibility almost gives me the ability to respond to this in a different way, and gives me power back. So I take the power back from this story. And when I've got the power, basically, I can change myself. I can change the story. I can change the way I react to it. As in, I don't react anymore. I can stay in the gap, and I can sort of respond, come up with creative responses. But as Vicki was saying as well, this is really, really hard. And for me, I mean, it's like there's teachings around, like, I don't have time to say, but if you've ever heard the fish basket, or if not, do ask about it. It's like this familiarity with this story, and it's quite threatening and sometimes distressing to move away from this story. So it needs a lot of metta to bring into it, and gently and slowly changing it. And as Vicki was saying, like supportive conditions are essential for me. I think I would have surrendered this story a long ago if I wasn't in the conditions I'm in. Supportive conditions, supportive people is essential. And I'll say just a bit about my experience of working with integration and working with these things is not a linear process. So it's not a linear process. It's not like a well-made puzzle that pieces just get them in the right place and they fit perfectly. It's not how it works. And another image I was getting is like, it's not like Iron Man's suit where everything is precisely cut and comes together in this neat package and it's just wholesome and neat and beautiful. It's not my experience of integration. It's the whole thing is, I mean, it involves the subconscious for me, definitely involves parts of my subconscious. So it's a lot more mysterious and a lot more messy. And an image I got around is almost like, there's like a soup, and I know some of the ingredients in it. I can recognize some of the ingredients, but most of it, I have absolutely no idea what they are in a way. But I can say that overall, like the flavor and the aroma has been improving. It's definitely been improving, and it's the feedback I get as well, thankfully. And so that keeps me going, and it's that sense of like working with the Dharma and putting myself in good conditions and surrounding myself with people who have the similar aspirations and similar efforts is really, really helpful in this. And yeah, and it's an ongoing process. So I'll, in a way, I've got quite an end to my talk in a way, because it's not an end. It's carrying on. It's going on. It's an ongoing process. And just implied with what Edward was saying earlier, I'll say keep calm and keep practicing. And I'll end it there.